This podcast is brought to you by our friends at Linode. Whether you're working on a personal project or managing your enterprise's infrastructure, Linode has the pricing, support, and scale you need to take your project to the next level. Get started on Linode today by going to linode.com/remote-ruby.
This is Remote Ruby.
Have you any remote idea to the meaning of the word?
Welcome back to both of you.
Hey. What's going on?
1 week we were sans Chris, the next week, 1 week we were sans Andrew, the next week sans Chris. I thought about taking today off and then coming back next week, but
We'll just all rotate, never talk to each other again, like completely.
I'd miss you all too much. Couldn't do it.
One day we'll have an episode with like 200 people on Zoom all at once, and it'll be our conference episode. We'll just pretend it's Southeast Ruby or something.
That would be fun to just throw the link out and just let anyone show up.
Also, I didn't realize this until just now. What a good year for you guys to have taken off for Southeast Ruby.
Yeah, I messaged Ernie and I said, it's really unfortunate, everything that's happening, but did we dodge a bullet?
Yeah, I can imagine that and I don't know what kind of agreements you have to do with the venues, but that stuff is things we've been worrying about with our wedding. If we couldn't have it. And what about the $10,000 in deposits or whatever that we've already done, for the venue and all these other things, caterers and all that. It's that stuff I'm sure has been kind of a nightmare for event organizers. So
yeah, we have an event insurance, but it only covers the actual event. Our resort, we're supposed to be in Cancun this week or last week, and we moved the trip to September, and the resort is closed now until October, and they're tough luck, your insurance doesn't cover COVID.
Oh man.
I have 18 months to use a credit, but
that is rough. Yeah, it's such a hard thing because those you want them to be understanding and work with you, but I don't they're not legally obligated to,
Yeah, totally.
So if they want to just be sorry, not my problem, they can, which really sucks.
Yeah, no, they totally I totally get it. They don't have to. And I read through the insurance policy top to bottom and knew that my chances were slim. But we had one thing that we thought would get us out of it, and they're no. I was well, all right. Hopefully we can go in 18 months.
I mean, from their end though, I see I get it, even though I don't agree with it, because they have no idea when they're going to be able to open up next.
Yeah, they might have to go out of business if they don't.
Oh, totally. I get it.
It's tough.
It's actually, so my entire adult life has been built on being proud of always booking my travel through companies directly. And this one time,
yeah,
I booked a trip through a travel website is the time a worldwide pandemic happens. So,
and this is why Jason never did it ever again. You're going to have this 30 years from now, your kids are going to be Dad's so old school about this stuff. This is going to be your reason. They're going to be so annoyed with you, and it's going to be that.
Well, so usually if you book a hotel direct, you have up to 24 hours before you get there to get out of it, right? And so my money is tied up in a travel agency.
That's not fun, but it's a crazy time.
Yeah, we talked enough COVID last episode, me and Andrew. So I'm sure we have something. I'm sure we have better things to talk about, like DHH showing us Hayes' Gemfile.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, that was cool. I really want to see Basecamp's now.
Really, Basecamp's Gemfile is larger than Hay.
I mean, surely. Maybe not. I mean, they're doing different things, but
that's true.
Some of the things in here seem like they would be shared between them, like the way they do their jobs with rescue.
I mean, I think DHH said it before. I guess just because they've always used rescue, they stick with it. But I remember I used Rescue at my last job, and I remember wishing we had Sidekick, but I didn't do enough background jobs to like for it to matter. But it is interesting that, like, I don't know. I guess it, stick with it.
Yeah, most likely they know that gem in and out. It's probably at this point they feel like they've written it themselves almost. So having to learn something new is, and its weak points or whatever maybe tougher. But yeah, it's interesting. You would expect they would, at least from the performance reasons and whatever. I actually haven't looked and seen how fast Rescue is for ages, so I don't even remember its benchmarks compared to Sidekick. But it seems like my de facto would be use Sidekick no matter what as my default, and it's interesting to see that. And of course, like the MySQL one, I think is a little bit more understandable. Like if you guys are all, MySQL good DBA kind of people on your team, then like, well, of course, use that. Yeah,
so. And your product that's made you bukus of money before, that's you've used for 20 years now, is running on MySQL. Why wouldn't you just stay with that? Somebody asked DHH on Twitter, like, do you have a preference between MySQL and Postgres? And he just like, I think he just like put a shrug emoji up and was like, no, I have no preference. I just use MySQL because that's the one I know.
He's using that because SQL Pro still doesn't support Postgres. Good old Table Plus, though, kind of solves that. But man, there was like so many times where I was like using SQL Pro and I was like, God, I just wish it would support Postgres. And I remember using MySQL for a bunch of apps a long time ago because I was like, I just want to be able to look at my database and interact with it directly from a nice GUI. And SQL Pro was the one. What else was in there? Gemfile that stood out.
The fact that they're using Sprockets Hacker, that stuck out to me.
I think we already could assume that, though, because they've been like, the Rails core team's been pretty open about, we still don't think Webpack is a better solution for like non-JavaScript assets. So I wasn't too surprised by that.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't. Now that you've reminded me about that, yeah, I guess not. But I was just like, because I don't Sprockets Rails. Most people don't have Sprockets Rails in their apps, do they? I know Sprockets, but I don't even know if I've seen Sprocket Rails before, unless it's just baked in.
Yeah, I thought it was like you can use Sprockets by itself, but normally use the Rails helpers and all that to make it more seamless. Because I think that's what supplies your style sheet, link tag, and those sorts of helpers, I'm guessing. So yeah, that one to me was like, oh yeah, there's their. When I saw that, I was like, yep, that explains their stance on the Webpack for style sheets, which I think is fair if you're not using a Tailwind or something. But if you are, there's really no reason to use it. So I can see it going either way, really. There's probably going to be more and more, CSS frameworks that make more sense to be compiled by JavaScript. And that'll be a shift we probably see in the future, as long as things continue down the Tailwind route, which it seems like it will.
There's almost no reason for me to ever use like Tailwind not through Webpack, because like all the officially supported stuff is like, here's the post CSS config and the Webpack config, and it's all like meant to work in that world. So I feel like I would just be doing myself a disservice if I try to put that in the asset pipeline versus Webpack. I also tried this week last week, Andrew and I talked about using Tailwind UI. And this week, I entertained like trying to put a Bootstrap theme in to try it. And it was just a nightmare trying to get it to run through Webpack, because the theme was like predicated on the idea that when you run the gulp task, it will minify everything for you. But every dependency it requires will be made as a minified file for each dependency. So like if I wanted to use their like Select.js in the theme that they support, I'd have to bring in their like minified version of Select.js. And so that works fine if you just put it in the DOM, like in the body in script tags. But if you try and do that in Webpack, it's like if you bring in jQuery, the next library depends on jQuery being in like the global namespace, and it's not. So then you like have to do that for every file, and there's like 10 files. And so I was like, this is not worth it. I'm just going to stick with Tailwind UI.
It's not the provide plugin that most people use with Webpack. There's another one that allows you to like import libraries into the global namespace that packages can use as well.
It's like externals or something like that.
It might be the context plugin or something like that. I don't know. I looked into this. You're giving me really bad flashbacks. So
I tried
down this road.
So many things. I tried, but then you've got like 10 libraries you have to do it for. So like I did it for the like using provide, and then I tried. It's not externals. It's something that starts with an E. Maybe that's it. I don't know. I tried combining them both, but like if I put all those script tags in the body, then I'm like defeating the purpose of trying to run all my assets through one thing anyway. So I was like, you know what? I hate this. Please give me my money back. So
I've been there so many times. I'm so relatable.
All that to say, the happy path for me is using assets in Webpack where like the ecosystem already supports like Webpack and stuff like that. Like if I was just using straight up Bootstrap and not like a theme, I could still run it through Webpack pretty much no problem, right? It was just trying to use another theme that gulped down. Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird seeing the announcement for the new Bootstrap stuff and then being like, I don't care anymore. Like I used Bootstrap for so long. And then now I'm like not super excited about the new release. It's weird.
So I started on the new release before I did the theme route. And they have this new utility API. So you can build your own utilities if they don't have it for you. But I found myself just going to Tailwind and be like, well, this is what I use in Tailwind, trying to bring it into Bootstrap, right? And so at that point, I'm just using Bootstrap for its components. And
yeah,
that's what I pay Tailwind UI for is its components, right? So
right. Yeah, the one thing I do like about Bootstrap's components is that they're like simpler in the sense that like the Tailwind UI components are perfect. But to get to that level of perfection, you got to wrap every button in a span that adds shadows and whatever just to get it perfect in the UI. And I'm like, I don't really want all this extra divs and stuff. And I get you have to do it, but it does make my HTML feel a lot bigger than, the old Bootstrap components, which, do not look near as nice, but it's a little bit simpler to sift through my HTML.
It's like one word class names that give you components in Bootstrap.
Yeah. And, the like list items and stuff in Tailwind are like a little bit, it just feels like you have to be super explicit, which is fine because anytime you want to customize it, that's why it's so great to customize. But so there's so many times where I'm like, I just want a list, like a list, it's regular list items, and I want what I expect without having to go back and remember what was the. And this is another one where I have a few apps that were still on Bootstrap, and I'd remember like it's justify content between and Bootstrap, and then justify between and Tailwind, and I get so confused going back and forth on those.
I always get tripped up on in Tailwind it's W full, and in Bootstrap it's W100, and like I'm always at work like, why isn't this working? Oh, it's because I use W full. And
that one gets me. That one gets me all the time.
The thing that I wanted to at one point convert Hatchbox over from Bootstrap to Tailwind. So I run both of them on there right now. And I can use either class, but good Lord, is it confusing to like go through that. And then there's a couple things like container that both of them use that it makes weird little things in the UI, but as I went to transfer everything over to Tailwind, I realized like just how much effort it was going to be. It's just a long process. Even if you have Tailwind UI, you've got to rewrite every single line of HTML, restructure it, put your ERB back in, for loops and whatever else. And it gets to be a very long process to go do that. And I miss those like quick components for like a card or whatever. And maybe, I would like to have like, you guys probably talked about this last week. I haven't listened to that episode yet, but like view components that are like your typical Tailwind UI components. That would be nice. That would be very nice. But I imagine it's probably maybe too strict or hard to customize those as much, as you start to define those. But yeah, it is a change of there are trade-offs. Like it's not a 1-for-1 change. It's just everything's better. Like you have other things that you lose from Bootstrap.
That's the thing. Yeah, we talked about that because it's hard to make those generic because those components, because it's like what classes do you let them override, like things like that. And so hopefully we have a future episode that will help us with that. But what I've been doing is still putting them into components, and it's actually helped quite a bit. So like the Tailwind UI panels, which to me are Bootstrap cards, I just made a view component for. And like then if I want a header, I just say like render component, like component with header and give it the content, component with footer. And it's all dynamic then. Like if I need that stuff, I can use it. And
sounds pretty nice. That's what I want.
It's been cool. And I made an avatar component because I use avatars a lot. And so literally all that component does, it's like you give it a user and then the component's responsible for figuring out where to get the URL from. And it defaults to like a medium size, but like Tailwind gives you 5 different avatar sizes. So I just followed like XS, small, things like that.
I was going to say that's exactly the avatar component I built in CodeFund was basically exactly that. You pass it a user and then you can also optionally pass the size.
Yeah. And it's those little things are like, they feel real good, but they're not real customizable, right? Like I don't need to change anything about the avatar except the size. Like it's always going to be a full circle, things like that. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun doing that. And my code has thanked me for it. So
I think like ideally, you don't want your components to be customizable. You want your layout to be customizable. So you're wrapping these components like in your like layout classes, but like ideally your component should not be, it shouldn't really have like, I mean, we talked about a little bit of this last episode, so I don't want to repeat too much, but the margin, you shouldn't have margin on your components because your layout that you're wrapping the components in should be like responsible for that space and stuff like that. And Grid makes that really nice. So
yeah,
I can see that. Makes sense. Like you should be able to push down, extra classes or something if you do need to add margin to the avatar, like pass it in as an option or something.
Or I would wrap the avatar in a div and then
in another
use
div.
their space, the new Tailwind spacing classes, or just put a margin on the bottom of it.
I'll tell you what I did that it's too early to tell how it will play out, but I made a Tailwind form builder for my app, and it will wrap. Anytime I use a label, it just applies the Tailwind classes. Anytime I use any kind of input, it'll wrap it in a div with the right classes or a span. And it's already starting to pay dividends because like before what I would do would maybe be to put all those classes into like one class like Bootstrap, right? Where I could be like form input, but then you still have to say form input every time you use a form input. So now I just tell my form right now, I'm using this Tailwind UI form builder, f.label, f.text field, and I get everything. It's been a dream so far, but we'll see.
That sounds nice. And another nice thing is that I can't remember his name, but they hired someone to work on Tailwind with Adam and Steve, and he updated the Tailwind CSS and IntelliSense plugin in VS Code. So now if you like copy like a line of like classes out of your HTML and like stick it in your CSS file, on the annoying part about doing that is if you have like medium or hover classes, like they don't work like all in the same class, but the new plugin will now offer you an option to abstract that for you, which is a really nice and a big time saver.
That's cool. I didn't know it would do all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I use that Tailwind plugin, and like I like how it reorders the classes based on like a different structure automatically on the save. So like when I have Ruby code that generates the classes like in a component or in the form builder, I'll actually still take this over to HTML, hit save just to get it to auto format it for me, and then bring it back. So
Yeah, I'll grab the names of those two extensions and we can stick them in the show notes.
but yeah, it's the form builder thing's been cool because I also set it up to look for if there's an error, go ahead and display the error message underneath the input too.
I think Form Builder doesn't get the like attention it needs because that is such a nice tool to have, and yet like everybody just uses the default Rails stuff, which is like not the best HTML layout that you get. So being able to customize that is awesome.
Yeah, my original code was like a class that is field with errors or has errors or whatever it's called, like the default that Rails generates. But then I can only target the elements underneath it, and like maybe I want to put an error message in there or like do some special kind of like Tailwind UI. One of their error inputs like has an SVG in the input if it fails. And it's like, oh, I can't do that without using like I can do it with a form builder.
It's too bad that is probably something not shareable because Tailwind UI is proprietary or a paid thing. Because that sounds like something I think probably everybody who uses Rails and Tailwind UI would want to be able to use. And I wonder if they'll ever, I don't know. There's not a great way to share that unless you like, open source it without all the classes. And it's like Doom where they're like, we'll open source Doom, but we're not going to give you any of the maps.
Well, then if you have Tailwind UI, it should be really easy for you to go put those classes back in. So technically, I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like I would totally take all of that code and without the classes and just slap classes in there and call it a day.
I've thought about that. I thought about at first extracting it because it's just a class, right? And putting it in a gem and being like, if you just showed me that you've purchased UI, like I'll just give you access to the repo kind of thing.
But I also I got it. You can do a private, you do an open source gem with the code and then a private gem that'll monkey patch all the classes in. And you can only get access to that if you've paid for Tailwind UI.
You joke, but I could make all those classes methods. And then if you pay, you have access to the methods that are just like included.
Yeah. Oh man, that would be kind of fun.
Yeah. So, it wasn't too hard and it would be cool to have other people help me out with it. So maybe I might do that hopefully before this episode's released. And
yeah, that'd be something I would love to use. Jumping back to Hayes Gemfile, we didn't make it very far in that Gemfile before going down the Tailwind and everything route. Did you guys see the Basecamp / Okra and the action text fork using the like Okra branch or whatever? That I'm really curious about because I know somebody on GitHub mentioned that they were redoing a bunch of the action text internals. And I've obviously spent a lot of time learning and using that for things. I'm really curious to see what improvements we're going to get from that. But I don't really know. Have you guys heard any of the changes that are coming? Because I don't think I know anything that's happening other than just things are getting improved.
I haven't heard. I would assume it's just stuff that they're abstracting, from changes from Hey.
Yeah. Yeah, because there was like little things where originally the sanitizer was like a constant that you couldn't modify. And it was like, well, clearly people need to be able to change this. Like if you're doing O embeds or anything, like adding YouTube embed or Instagram and any of those, they're going to want to insert script tags in their own HTML. So you kind of need to be able to permit and change those allowed tags on the sanitizer and stuff. So I'm hoping that it's a lot of changes around that allow you just to do a lot more flexible stuff, like adding HR tags and other tables and little things that are like a massive pain in the butt right now. Hopefully that gets improved. I do think that there's almost got to be some generic way of doing custom SGID attachment thing where it can look up those without having to create your own controller. It'd be nice to have something that could be built into Rails, a bit more like active storage, where you're just like, this is your interface to create files and they're generic, and maybe they can do something similar for, making any model action text attachable or something. But we shall see. I'm excited to see what's going on there. There is a lot of TurboLinks changes that people have been diving into, which I thought was cool, because all of that, at least the client side, is all open, which is fine. Did you guys read, I forget the name of the guy who wrote the article that kind of dove through the new TurboLinks frames stuff? Did you guys see that?
I saw it. I haven't had time to read it because I've been so busy.
Yeah, I skimmed the article. We'll have to post it in the show notes. But the concept is kind of like little pieces of the page will all be different TurboLinks frames. And so kind of like iframes where they work independently. I think the goal of this is to, work like a GitHub uses PJAX, which replaces a, piece of the page with an AJAX request. I think that looks to be like how TurboLinks is going to start tackling things going forward. So things like form errors can just re-render the form and not the entire page, which is going to be awesome. So we'll find out a lot more details as they go, but it looks like it's going to be a really nice upgrade there, and probably will work very similar to how we're doing, cable ready. If you want to re-render the form and update the page, you can just DOM diff with that. And so it sounds like it might be pretty similar in concept there, at least, which is cool.
Yeah, somebody asked on Twitter, how similar are the changes like to Stimulus Reflex? And DH had said something along the lines of like similar in spirit, different approaches kind of thing. So,
yeah, it's going to be cool. I mean, it's nice to see both of those pushing different, implementations of the same kind of direction, which is great, because that is, TurboLinks has given us a lot of speed, but mostly just from navigating and not, it didn't really have interactivity in mind. And these now are like, okay, well, what if we rethink all this with the same approach and make them interactive and kind of, like a lot of people are saying, gets rid of the need for a single page app, heavy JavaScript front end. You can kind of accomplish that by, rendering partials in the server and diffing in the browser and just updating that. And it's pretty cool.
Let's take guesses. Do you think their approach will use partials? Because I know they're not, I don't know, but I assume they're not using view components, given that that was kind of shot down when view component tried to merge into Rails.
Yeah, and it's not in their Gemfile, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I'm guessing hardcore partials too, like the nasty kind.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because the complexity of GitHub or Shopify versus the complexity of Hey, the client side, it just seems a lot simpler to build Hey or Basecamp's UI in comparison to something like GitHub, which has to deal with every single file type, every different programming language. There's a lot to GitHub, so I can imagine it's kind of more complex to do that. And I'm wondering, that's probably why if they do partials, it's probably not as complex of needs, be my guess.
Yeah. Hopefully with the new like rendering in Rails 6.1, that will be a pretty easy thing to just, I don't know how it was going to work, but it'd be cool if we could use that technology with Vue components.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like you should be able to, and a partial and Vue component are pretty interchangeable. You're either calling a render method that's built into Rails or like a class's render method, more or less. So
it's so awesome and so frustrating to be waiting for this. Like, it's nice because like there's a lot of excitement and buzz in Rails, like for all of us right now, like waiting to see what the technology will be. But also like I want it right now. I want it yesterday. So
yeah, me too. And it's like, the client side stuff of TurboLinks is all out there already. And you're like, I just want to be able to install it from, a library, and that's it, Yeah, it's like so close, but yet it's not ready yet. And that, I don't know if they've got any documentation for the stuff started, so maybe that's going to take some time or whatever, and we'll see. But the community is going to be a good one to just go write up everything that needs to be written up pretty quick. I think people are chomping at the bit to grab this stuff and start using it. I know I am. So hopefully we'll see really quick adoption and lots of tutorials and things and all that.
I mean, how many communities do you think are there where someone releases a product? Now, granted, it's the person owns the company, made the framework you all use. Like, how many other communities do all these members just flock to view your source maps to try and look at all your code and reverse engineer it to try and figure out what's coming? Like, I've never heard of something like this before.
Yeah. Laravel's the only other one I could think of. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of like flocking to a product that the creator is like put out there.
It's wild and it's really cool. Like, it's fun.
Jason, were you disappointed to see they use bcrypt directly and on device?
It's hard to, I don't know. I'm not surprised. I know how much they hate devise and subsequently me. So
yeah, I thought that was funny. I'm excited to see they use the WebAuthn gem for the WebAuth stuff. I don't think I've ever implemented that. One of my friends was fiddling with like the idea of like generating kind of like SSH keys where you have a public and private key and keeping that in your browser with an extension so you could log in. He experimented with that on one of his like college projects, and it was pretty cool, like really good security, and you don't have to remember passwords. Pretty cool. So I'm excited to see, they're pushing people to do two-factor if you pay and all that. And it's good to see that. And I'm sure we'll maybe see some, fixes or whatever else come out of them as they're, building and maintaining this. Because there's not a lot of good two-factor libraries or good instructions on how to do it in Rails. Like there's the devise two-factor gems, but they're actually like, they want you to submit your email and your password and your two-factor code all at the same time. But like no good user experience is like that because they need your email first to determine if you need the two-factor code. Or, Stripe or something will want you'll be logged in, but then they're going to want to maybe prompt for your two-factor code once it's expired after 6 hours or something. And so, that stuff, I think I'm going to have to make a screencast on doing a better implementation of two-factor login and like let you log in with your email and password, but you're not fully logged in until you do your two-factor code and that sort of thing. But yeah, authentication stuff is kind of interesting that they're like trying to more modernize that instead of just straight up email and password, which I think is cool.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense why devise wouldn't fit too well into that kind of workflow.
Right.
One thing.
I wonder how much of that is Warden is the issue or devise. Like Warden to me, I haven't fiddled with it directly too much, but it seems kind of like opaque in how it works. Because all I ever see is like warden.authenticate. And then I'm like, I don't really know what happens then. And like, how do you find out if it failed and all that? And it doesn't seem as clear or as well documented.
It's actually not that bad. I used it on a Hanami app one time because there is no like devise for Hanami. And so I just implemented Warden straight up because Hanami is rack. It definitely made me like appreciate something like devise more. But it wasn't too bad to work with. Authentication as a whole is just...
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I don't want to have to deal with, the forgot your password workflow or any of that. I just want authentication most of the time and I want to move on to my app.
Have you seen, I didn't notice this the other day, but since we're talking about it, I have it pulled up. In their development and test group, they have this gem called Break. And I had not heard of it before, so I just looked it up. It is a newer-ish gem that is a debugger for Ruby, and it works with both IRB and pry. And so whenever you like binding.pry, you can type next to go to the next line of the program or like step into a method. It's really cool.
I've seen that. I have recently stopped using pry because binding IRB is pretty good for what I usually use it for. But yeah, I have heard of Break because there's a VS Code plugin that was trying to implement it in a really nice way.
Where you could actually like use the like...
Yeah, because you know how it's pretty busted right now. And you can do it, but not really in a Rails app. But I think I can't remember the gem name, or the package name, but it was some VS Code plugin that was trying to use that gem. And that's when I like read about it and got like a little familiar with it.
I'll tell you in VS Code what just came out of nowhere and was like, I work now and I'm amazing, is Solargraph. Like, yeah, I've had it installed forever. And out of nowhere the other day, it's like giving me like IntelliSense for methods I've defined and their arguments and things like that. Out of nowhere. And I was like...
Yours hasn't been working?
No, not like that.
What? Really?
On any project.
The settings?
I haven't tweaked anything.
Mine has been... I mean, you have to have the Solargraph gem installed, and it works way better if you have the Solargraph config file. And then it works even more better if you have this file called rails.rb, which defines like all the Solargraph classes for Rails. So I have like a Solargraph config file and a Rails RB file that I always use, and I have them in my git ignore.
Where
and
do you
Solargraph has always worked. If you look at the Solargraph extension in VS Code, the instructions are pretty good.
That's like a game changer for me because I've always had it installed and I always keep my gem up to date. And like it gives me like the Ruby, like for Ruby methods and stuff, it's fine, but it's never been good for like my own stuff for me.
Really? Like I'm looking right now, I can hover over the name of my serializer and it tells me like the names that it accepts and stuff.
Huh. Anyway,
and like I can hover over objects and stuff and it'll show me the table.
Well, sounds like you're going to have to teach me how to use Solargraph. But yeah, it's interesting. I would love an extension that worked with this break gem. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to
I'll
try
see if I can find it.
I've always been using, I used pry for a long time, but yeah, like the bybug and binding.IRB stuff is good enough. And the same thing happened to me with that better errors gem. Like the built-in web console stuff is good enough for me now too, that I don't add any of those anymore. One of the gems I want to point out here was the geared pagination. Have you guys seen that one?
I've seen it in the past, but I've never used it. I've always just looked at it and go, oh, that's cool that they have one.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I don't think I've ever used it, but it is pretty neat. And anybody that isn't familiar with it, it basically will generate pagination, but the pages get longer and longer with results because you clearly aren't finding what you're looking for if you're on page 30. So it starts displaying 100 results per page or something to help you, sift through stuff faster when they're more aware that you're not finding what you want, which I thought was just a really cool idea, and it's like intuitive, like naturally, which is what Basecamp is very good about doing when they design stuff, making it like intuitive from the user's intentions angle or whatever. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I thought I'd throw that one out there. I still use Pagey for everything because Pagey's awesome. But
same. You turned me on to Pagey.
Yeah, and he just keeps making it faster and faster, and I'm like, all right, keep going. This is amazing.
I also find it interesting, and I know that like DHH has been outspoken about like linters and things, and then you have RuboCop Performance, RuboCop Rails, SaaSlint. Like, it's interesting. I wonder how that got in there and what they think of it. Specifically,
I saw a comment on Twitter about that, and DHH was basically like, every single day I think about throwing it out.
That's about what I expected. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, well, and they also have Brakeman, which I thought was cool. Bundler Audit, I have mixed feelings about, but I think it provides some benefit, I guess.
I'm curious what that Hay Bales gem is. It's the one that says deploys in local CI as its comment in the development group.
It's their it's the Kubernetes cluster management.
I know Hay Bales was their code name, I think, for Hay before they secured like the trademark and everything.
Oh, really?
I saw that on Twitter. I think
what
it's
would
Hay
they
Bales.
have named? What would you have named the product if they couldn't get that domain? That would be a tough question.
Mail Camp.
Mail Camp. You can start your competitor
Google.
now.
Did you see the company that made the buy landing page?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
It was so funny when you got to like where they have like the doodles that go down, but on buy it's like just a bunch of circles and like really hand-drawn lines that are terrible. It was pretty funny.
The number 59 was like hidden throughout, and I was just like, nice. Very nice.
I deleted 269 lines of code in a PR earlier, and I said too nice, and nobody got it.
Aw,
Been a rough
I
day.
would have, Jason. Don't worry.
He's going to add you to the repo just for that, just to like laugh at his jokes.
Real proud.
I mean,
oh, man.
I'm not doing anything. You can. I'll just comment. I'll review all your PRs and be like, wow, Jason, this is the most excellent code I've ever read in my entire life. And I got that 69 joke. Nice.
Approved. Yeah.
Yeah. It's positive reinforcement all day long, following you around.
You can make like a Dependabot version that's like just gives you comments on stuff automatically. I love it.
Dude, that's an easy GitHub action. It's called Jason's feedback. Any commit, just
like
clapping emoji. Excellent job.
Oh man. Any other gems in there that you guys saw that were interesting?
VCR.
HTTP parties in there, and I know that triggers a lot of people.
Why? I like to party.
You like to party hard? Yeah.
I see the active record encryption stuff, which I know DHH talked about is going to go into Rails eventually. I think that's cool. I've been using a couple of different ones. The one I've most enjoyed recently was Andrew Kane's, Lockbox. And there's another one that goes with it, Blind Index. Both those are really good. So I'm excited to see how that works if it's like a first party solution in Active Record.
Yeah, that would be really awesome. And it's basically a requirement at this point for every app, GDPR, all that fun. So yeah, it makes sense that it would be built into Rails. The blind index stuff is like phenomenal though. Being able to see, this is in your database, even though we can never really know or like pull it out or query against it. I mean,
yeah, it's crazy. Like I can be like, oh, this record already exists, but I don't know what it is. I just know that it already exists.
I have no idea which record it is, but it's in there. Trust me.
One thing that Andrew from Mara pointed out this morning was that they use Mocha because you and I talked about in our last episode, it's just you and me, I think I literally asked, well, I wonder what Basecamp uses for mocking and stubbing, and do they? And then it's like, here's the answer. The question revealed an hour later.
You did. I listened to that episode this morning, and that's basically, you were like, they have to be, are they stubbing and mocking? And if so, are they using like their own thing, or are they using something built in a mini test? Or are they using like another gem? So yeah, that was kind of funny.
I love it when a question gets answered.
Yeah, it's good timing. What question are you going to ask this week what secret will they reveal?
When are we going to get authentication in Rails?
I think we're going to be disappointed on this one.
I don't even think like Devise is the answer to the question, right? Like,
yeah,
I just want something.
Yeah, and traditionally, like nothing ever gets merged from the community directly into Rails. It's always kind of rewritten, a little bit more Railsy, a little bit less customizable. I'm curious. I've never looked into this rspamd open source spam filtering system, but that's been a painful one for me with the Go Rails comments. Those get to be kind of frustrating to deal with, and code in comments often triggers spam filters. And so I actually end up paying for a Kismet from WordPress and you run all the comments through that. And it's like, it's good enough. There's a lot of, false positives and, all that stuff. But for the most part, it's good enough. And it catches a lot of the like spam just trying to post links, or a lot of people are smart enough that their bots will go and create a post that appears to be normal, and then they'll go back and edit it, assuming that the spam check doesn't get run twice. So they can try and sneak in their links on the edit, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it looks like something I'll have to check out and see about using that. I like that they're using Elasticsearch too. No search kick though, just using Elasticsearch directly.
Straight up.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a 134 line Gemfile, pretty short for compared to a lot of projects I've seen.
It is, and a lot of it, like, since it's grouped together, you can see like 7 or 8 of those are rescue related gems, right? Like, so they're all gems around one like feature.
Yeah, right. Cool. I thought the active storage redundancy one was interesting, because isn't there a mirroring active storage option you can do right now that like mirrors, S3 uploads to Google Cloud or whatever?
I think so.
I guess this maybe is some sort of, addition to that. Maybe we'll see that come out at some point. Mostly I'm just excited for the new TurboLink stuff.
Yeah, I think we all are. The only other thing that stuck out to me in this was Console 1984, which is a gem that DHH said is going to get upstreamed into Rails, which is basically it appears like a gem that helps protect your production data when you're logging into production, like on our Rails console, and it will allow you to log the reason why you're on that production console. So just some more safety around your production data. And I guess that has to do with GDPR as well.
Like log all your actions you take to, like, it's a full like audit of what you do in the console and why you're there. It's cool.
Right.
That's pretty nice. I like that.
And Sentry. That was the only other one that stuck out to me.
Yeah, Sentry. It makes sense they would use them. Like,
local time is cool. I know that's one of theirs. That's the one that you can use like
use
relative timestamps.
Yeah, the browser time zone to always render local time, so your server doesn't have to deal with it.
And it's like safe with caching and things like that.
Yeah, it's a big benefit.
We ended up, like, we looked at it. Andrew Famera suggested it. We ended up writing our own that relies, because like we already do so much with Moment and stuff. We wrote our own that is like a stimulus controller that just relies on that. But yeah, it's cool. It's like one of those little interesting problems.
Right. And like, you can be traveling too. And if you're normally on the West Coast and you're on the East Coast, then like you still get the time for all those events in the East Coast time where you're at, so it feels like the app's a bit more intuitive that way. I use it for pretty much everything because I don't have to do most of the time. I'm just looking at relative times, so it makes sense to use that for any of those situations. But if you're like, if you're displaying stuff that's like this draft is going to be posted at whatever time and whatever time zone, you probably want that to be more explicit instead of just converted to the local time or something like that, especially if it's going to be run with a server, like a background job or something, But yeah, I love that gem. And I don't think that one has been updated in like years, not majorly, because there's really nothing it needs to do unless the browser's time zone API changes.
I also think it's cool that they're using pwned, and not letting you, if you use a password that's on the, have you been pwned registry, they just won't even let you do that. I think that's really cool. I realize there's a gem for that.
Yeah. And there's a devise pwned gem too that'll do it as part of devise. And that's, I think, another one that their API uses the blind index so that you can give it your password, even though it shouldn't ever know your password. And that allows you to search it and see if it exists or not, which is cool.
Yeah.
Something like that. Cool. It's not exactly the same way, but because I think you manipulate your password into a hash that is not sending them your real password or whatever. But yeah, something similar.
This is cool. Once again, not only do people dive into a company's source maps, they also spend an hour talking about their Gemfile.
Yeah, no kidding. Right. Imagine how many hours of conversations we could have if we saw their source code.
Oh my gosh.
Infinite. It would be a live stream. It wouldn't be a podcast anymore.
Yeah, it would be like a month-long thing where we're like, ooh, look at this. Oh, wow, look at that. This is strange. What's this doing here? What's this Kubernetes?
You have to have fireside chats.
Well, it's time for me to jet. Anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so. It's good to be back. We'll talk to you guys more next week. Whenever the, your secret question gets answered, and we can talk about that next week.
Anxiously waiting. All right. Well, good to catch up and see y'all next week.
Later.
This podcast is brought to you by our friends at Linode. With 11 data centers worldwide, including their newest data center in Sydney, Australia, enterprise-grade hardware, S3-compatible storage option, and their next-generation network, Linode delivers the performance you expect at a price that you don't. Get started on Linode today by going to linode.com/remote Ruby.